had the privilege and honor to be part of a delegation that was on a trade mission to Berlin for the Berlinale Film Festival and European Film Market. So it was 8 music publishers and 8 composers, creators from Canada going over to Berlin to experience the market and to create new opportunities for creative work and collaborations going forward. So we stayed in East Berlin and we attended the amazing and gigantic thing that is the European film market. I mean, there are over 1,000 screenings, close to 400,000 tickets sold, and the official delegates that come to Berlin for the Berlinale and for the EFM number well into the 10,000s. It's an absolutely massive thing, and also overwhelming, intense, and a little bit intimidating, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm well into the 15th year of my career, and for myself, and I'm sure for a lot of other creative types of all stripes, how to get work, how to connect with people, how to network effectively is probably one of the biggest questions that people ask themselves and are asking others. And I'm certainly no exception. And for me, I think for a long time, I thought I was missing something. Like I thought, God, there's a secret club that you need to belong to. There's a strategy that I'm not aware of. There is some sort of silver bullet. And once I find out what it is, then I'm finally going to be serious. I'm going to be for real. I'm going to be, in the game. And it's eluded me for all this time. And I think I finally found... No, it's not the secret. I think what I found is there is no good answer to this. It's just fucking hard. Anyways, in a way, and speaking to some other music publishers who don't really operate in that world as I do, and a lot of other people and just sort of, mentors of mine and people who've been kind enough to put their arm around me and say, Adrian, let me show you the way. That's just the conclusion I've come to. It's not the answer I was looking for, but it is an answer. And in a way, it makes me feel better about what I've been doing. I'm not missing the ball. You're not missing out on anything. If you feel like, you're going out and pounding the pavement and hashtag hustling and, getting out to these festivals or whatever kind of networking opportunities you're going after, and you're finding like it's hard, guess what? It just is. That's the way it goes. So you do your best and you go out there and you put yourself out there and you try and tell your story. And that's all you can do. That said, I do want to share with you my one big takeaway from 5 intense and overwhelming days at the Berlinale, at the EFM. One of the things that we were able to take part of, which was really amazing, was something called Nordic Film Day. So that's countries like Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Norway. Their countries have gotten together to promote film music of the composers that are from their respective countries. And it's an amazing thing. There's some real neat energy going on in those countries, as we've seen recently from, countries like Iceland with Jóhann Jóhannsson and more recently Hildur Guðnadóttir winning the Oscar for Joker. They had a really interesting workshop. It was a pitch session where composers would get up and they play a 3-minute clip of their best music, and then they had to get up in front of an audience. And a group of music publishers, music supervisors, and a PR, public relations professional, and pitch themselves as a composer. Wow, this is high stakes, high intensity. That ain't easy. I really commend them all. Among their group were a couple of Facebook friends of mine that I finally got to meet in person. Oscar Fogelström and Christina Hals. Oscar's from Sweden and Christine's from Norway. And they did a great job. I mean, they're working under pressure. They had to get up there and not only present their music, but present themselves as professionals and creatives. And they did a bang-up job. But, overall, I saw where I think a lot of us as creatives fall short. And here's the number one takeaway from this whole experience. Storytelling is everything. I mean, storytelling is everything. It's what you do when you wake up in the morning, you look at yourself in the mirror. It's what you do when you talk to yourself about who you are and what you're doing. Are you doing well? Are you doing poorly? Do you feel confident? Do you feel overwhelmed? What situation are you walking into next? What's the narrative inside your head about anything that's going on? That's storytelling. But then there's another type of storytelling, which is deciding ahead of time who you are, what you do, and what your why is. Like, why are you here? What are you trying to accomplish? And also a story about the people that you want to attract and the kind of things that you want to tell them and how you want to tell that story and what it is you want them to understand and how are you going to formulate that. That's the trickiest part, is to try to put into words what it is you do, how you do it, and why you do it, and getting other people not only to understand it, but to get excited about it and to lean into your story, and then to want to take some sort of action. They want to work with you, they want to contact you, they just want to go and check out your website and see what you do and learn a bit more, maybe get in touch and see if there's some sort of collaborative opportunities for the both of you. So there were a few things that I saw that were sort of common among all the people that got up. I mean, they were all really nervous, and that's to be expected. Some of them had their stories prepared a bit better than others. Some of them were good speakers, some of them were less good. Some of them had their music really together and were sort of more experienced. Some of them were just starting out. But most of them, you just felt like there was a vagueness about what they did, and it kind of, you sound like just about everyone else. There was no focus on differentiation. Like, what do you do that no one else does? Is it the way you work? Is it the way your music sounds? Is it some sort of thing about your background or heritage that really stands out? The other thing was they weren't really sure about how to deliver a message about their value, what it is that you do that somebody else might want. Do you understand what other people need from you? Do you understand how to deliver that? And then, of course, they weren't really able to sort of deliver that final thing, that little nugget where you go, oh man, I want to check out that person's website. I want to hear more about their music. I want to follow up with them and see what they're doing next, and be part of that energy. You want them to act on the story that you've told them. You want them to go, oh, that's it. I want some more of that. There are a lot of parts of your career that you're not going to have control over, but to a certain degree, how people perceive you and the story that you're telling them, that's within your control. And I think that's why thinking about what your story is, where you came from, what you do, how you work, what your why is, what is so important about you, why someone should choose you over somebody else, or why they want to work with you, and what's exciting about that. That's something within your control, and something we can all work on and get better at doing. So for many years, I would go to these networking events and people would ask me naturally, what kind of music do you make and what does it sound like? And, there was fundamentally something wrong with the question. Describing what something is without actually experiencing the thing itself is kind of pointless. So in the end, what I decided was to approach it from a completely different perspective, and also change the way I work to a certain degree. And now what I do instead is talk about the way that I work. The collaborative journeys and the exciting and sometimes dangerous and daring ways that I make music with my collaborators, and the way that I collaborate, and how those collaborations are deeply woven into the fabric of the story and the why of their story. Instead of saying what the music of a film, let's say like Last Call, sounds like, I'm telling the story about how I made the music. So Last Call is a single take, split screen movie. It's not like 1917 where they cleverly hit all the edits. This is a movie that literally, a feature film where there are no edits in it. So instead I'm talking about how the music was made. The fact that as a semi-joke, I told Gavin Michael Booth, the director of Last Call, that I would create the music in a single take to match his movie. And then he texts me and he forwards me a news item on the national broadcaster that not only shows how they're shooting the film, but then cuts back to the studio and the announcer goes, and the film will not be the only thing that's done in a single take. And I realized, oh crap, now I'm really hammered into doing it this way. How we battled, raging storms and almost got killed on the drive down to Windsor where we were recording the score. How we did the entire score in 4 takes, and how the final thing is presented as a single take without any edits. This is something that gave the musicians a high wire act to perform, which you can hear in the score. And when it's frail and when it falls apart and when it's not quite perfect, it matches what happens on screen because that's the story. And that becomes the most important thing, not because it's a string quartet, not because it has this atmospheric quality to it, and not even because of the themes that are presented, and not even because of the emotional quality. Those are all parts of it, but those are parts that are a part of almost any score that can be made. But the way that this is developed and the way that I worked with Gavin, and that high wire act that creates such an intensity of experience and lends itself to the screen and helps tell that story, that becomes the most important part. It's a story about storytelling, and it's all wrapped up in a story of its own. There's like this 3 layers meta thing, and people really tend to lean into that. And I found that, especially at Berlinale, when I was meeting people I didn't know, or trying to break into conversations, or interface with people who were not there to talk to composers. They were there to finance their film or do something else. They really didn't want to talk to someone like me at that point. That really helped me bridge that gap and get me to a place that I might not have been able to get to otherwise. So when you're thinking about your own story and how to tell it, here are some of my tips that I learned from the panels and from my own experience, and for many, many years of thinking about how to sort of develop this kind of an elevator pitch, or a method of telling my story in a way that's compelling and makes people lean in and want to, go further with me. Number one, when you're telling your story, it has to be formulated like a story. All right, so what does a story have? A beginning, a middle, and end. It has a hero's journey. It has a sort of end point where there's a tension, and it has to have a tension and an eventual release, and the hero has to come back and somehow win the day and get the elixir of life and bring it back and sort of have change through the experience. Oren Klaff wrote a really great book that I recommend to all creatives called Pitch Anything. He has this idea about how stories are formulated, and I love this because it's so simple. Put a person in the jungle. Set the beasts upon them. Will they survive? It's a 1, 2, 3. So you've got yourself as the hero of the journey. You've put yourself in the jungle. You've set the beasts upon yourself. You've given a scenario where you have something to overcome. You have a tension point. You have an obstacle you're facing. And then it's about how you overcame that obstacle and how you won the day. It has to be compelling, it has to be interesting, and it has to be purpose-driven. It can't be something that doesn't have any reason behind why you did it. It can't just be a fun story where, you ended up in your hotel room drunk and something crazy happened and then you didn't get arrested. I mean, this is not something that's going to help you or your collaborators see the way forward. And it has to be about something that's bigger than yourself. So in the case of myself, it's about my film team. It's about the collaboration. It's about the story that we were trying to tell. So there's a story within the story. But ultimately, everything I do and did for that particular example I gave was about serving the story. It's about serving a bigger purpose than myself. It's about a win for the team. Because what you want to do is tell a story that lets the person that you're talking to see themselves in a similar situation. They can imagine being the person that worked with you on that. They can see themselves as the person that was the beneficiary of your intellect, your emotional understanding, your storytelling abilities, your craft, and everything else that you're doing, and the journey that you went on and the obstacles that you overcame. They can imagine, if I get myself involved with something with this person, I am going to be able to get a win, just like the story that they just told. In these situations, you don't want to be selling yourself, right? You're inadvertently doing, but it's something more along the lines of something called pull marketing, where you're creating interest and desire in the person you're talking to by creating a scenario where they can imagine themselves in that story. They can imagine the wins that you're going to both get. It has to be win-win. It has to be about the bigger picture. And ultimately, it's about the value that you bring to others. It's about the value that you could potentially bring to the person that is on the other side of that conversation. And that's the ultimate thing that you always have to be focused on. All right, I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned something, and I hope you can apply these things and are applying some of these things. So let me know in the comments below. How do you tell your story? Are you struggling with it? Do you have things that you're hung up on? Do you not really see how you can formulate the things that you've experienced in your life, or the ways that you work, or the things that you've done into a cohesive story? Or are you really great at it? Are you kicking my ass at doing this kind of stuff? I'd love to hear both sides. And yeah, tell me what you're doing and how you want to do it in the future, and the things you're coming up against, the challenges as a creative person when you're trying to get other people to care about the work you're doing. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Ding that bell if you want to be notified, and we'll see you guys in the next one.